The summer air of 1999 was heavy in the cul-de-sac, the kind of night where even the insects seemed too tired to sing. Streetlights hummed with a faint electric buzz, casting pale amber circles on the asphalt. The houses sat in silence, curtains drawn, the neighborhood tucked into its usual rhythm of sleep and television murmurs inside one of these houses, white siding, neatly trimmed hedges, a porch swing that hadn't moved in weeks. The living room glowed faintly with the flicker of a late-night program. Thomas and Elaine Cartwright sat in their matching armchairs, neither watching the TV nor speaking to each other. They were both listening not to the show, but to the sound of the house breathing, the faint groan of the old pipes, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the hallway clock. Then there was another sound, a sound they hadn't heard in years. It was the creak of the front door latch. At first, they didn't look at each other. Elaine's hand froze mid-stitch, the half-embroidered square dangling from her lap. Thomas' jaw tightened. He slowly muted the television. The door opened with the hesitancy of someone coming home after curfew, soft, careful, as if not wanting to wake the household. And then she stepped inside, a teenage girl, 16, maybe 17. Her hair was the color of wheat in late summer, tangled in loose strands that caught the lamplight. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, like she'd been living somewhere without sun. Her clothes looked a little wrong, out of place in 1999, like a thrift store patchwork of decades, a faded floral dress, a knit cardigan that hung too long on her arms, scuffed black shoes. She didn't look at them, didn't speak. She walked across the living room floor with soft, deliberate steps. The air seemed to bend around her like the space she moved through was slightly off. Thomas gripped the armrest, his knuckles whitening. Elaine's lips parted as if to say something, anything, but the words snagged in her throat. The girl's eyes were fixed on the staircase. Without pause, she began climbing, her hand trailing along the banister, fingers brushing over the polished wood like she knew every groove, every dent. When she reached the top, she turned down the hall toward the bedroom at the far, and it wasn't until she was almost inside that Elaine whispered, almost breathless, "Hannah." The girl stopped only for a fraction of a second. Her shoulders rose and fell with the rhythm of someone holding their breath. Then, without turning, she stepped into the bedroom and shut the door. The click of the latch echoed in the silence. Elaine's eyes brimmed with something like recognition and terror intertwined, but Thomas' voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't." Elaine blinked, startled, what his gaze didn't leave the darkened hallway above. His voice was low, tight, almost shaking, not with fear, but with some deep, buried certainty. "We don't have a daughter." The words hung there, heavy, absurd, the kind of statement that if spoken in daylight would be laughed off or questioned, but in that dim living room, they felt like a final verdict. Elaine shook her head slowly as if to deny both the statement and the world that had produced it. Her voice cracked. "Thomas, that's not possible. But she couldn't finish. The hallway above them remained silent. No footsteps, no movement, not even the rustle of bedsheets. It was as if the girl had dissolved into the air the moment the door closed. The minutes stretched. Elaine's fingers trembled as she set her embroidery aside. She stood, hesitated, then took a step toward the staircase. Thomas' voice, sharper this time, pulled her back. "Don't go up there." She stared at him, searching for an explanation in his face, but found only the hard, fixed lines of someone who'd already made peace with an impossible truth. The clock on the wall ticked over to 11:37 p.m., and still the house was utterly still. The narrator's voice here dips into a slow psychological undertone. "Imagine someone walking into your home, someone you know, someone you loved, and having the person closest to you insist they've never existed. Imagine that certainty pressed against the proof standing in front of you. Which would you believe, the sight before your eyes or the words from a voice you've trusted for decades?" This section lingers on the tension of that night. Elaine sits back down, but her gaze keeps drifting toward the stairs, as if expecting the girl to come down, explain herself, prove Thomas wrong. Thomas doesn't look away from the dark hallway, his expression unreadable, but his hands gripping the chair so tightly that the leather creaks outside. The wind stirs just enough to make the porch swing shift once, then still again. The room feels heavier. The muted TV screen flashes images neither of them see, and somewhere upstairs, behind a door that hasn't been opened in years, the girl is either lying quietly in bed or not there at all. The Cartwright house had always looked ordinary from the street, white clapboard siding, a roof of weathered gray shingles, a porch light that flickered in damp weather. It was the kind of home you'd pass 100 times without ever noticing. Unremarkable, dependable, quietly lived in. But to anyone who had ever stepped inside, there was an undeniable sense of order, not the cozy chaos of a family home, not the smell of recent cooking or the clutter of everyday life. The rooms here were curated like a museum, furniture, polished books aligned perfectly on their shelves, not a photograph frame out of place, especially upstairs. No one was allowed upstairs if you were a guest, and there were very few. You stayed in the living room, maybe the kitchen if Elaine was in a generous mood, but the staircase was a line you did not cross. Even the family's closest neighbors could not remember the last time they'd been beyond the bottom step. The narrator lingers on the detail of that staircase. It rises from the heart of the house like a spine, each wooden step darkened with years of polish. On the wall beside it, a neat arrangement of family photos, but not a single image contains a child, not one. A wedding portrait, an anniversary dinner, a snapshot of Thomas and Elaine in front of the house the year they bought it. And then just at the edge of one frame, the shadow of a third figure, cropped so tightly you can't tell if it's intentional or accidental when you stand in the living room. The upstairs hallway is visible for only a second before it disappears from view. It has a strange effect. You feel like the upper floor is part of another house entirely. That feeling is stronger in the late hours when the house has settled into its night. Sounds the slow tick of the hallway clock, the deep shifting groans of the wood. The air at the base of the stairs feels cooler, as if the temperature changes the moment you set foot on that first step. Thomas never explained the rule, but he enforced it with quiet certainty. If someone joked about exploring the upstairs, his voice would cut through the conversation. Upstairs is private. It wasn't angry, but it left no room for argument. Elaine enforced it differently. She would just smile politely and change the subject, usually to something about the weather or the neighbor's hydrangeas, but her eyes would flick just for a moment toward the top of the stairs, always toward the same door at the end of the hall. That door, white paint, brass knob dulled from age, a faint crack in the wood near the top hinge. There was nothing about it that stood out except that it was always closed and always locked. If you were upstairs by accident, in the rare occasion someone had to use the bathroom, the hallway felt too long, the shadows too deep, you would find yourself glancing over your shoulder before you even reached the landing. The locked door was always there waiting at the end. The narrator now pulls back into a series of still life details that paint the house as a place where memory has been edited. In the dining room, an old oak cabinet displays porcelain figurines, each facing forward, except for Oni's small girl in a blue dress turned to face the wall. In the study, a row of encyclopedias, with one missing volume. The shelf is otherwise dust-free, as if the gap has existed for decades. In the hall closet, a box of Christmas decorations except for stockings. It's as though the house itself participates in the erasure. Yet for all the careful curation, there are hints. The upstairs bedroom once belonged to someone who lived, laughed, and was loved here. When the summer wind blows in just the right direction, a faint scent drifts down the staircase, something floral, sweet, like the memory of a perfume worn long ago. And sometimes in the still hours after midnight, a sound escapes from behind the locked door, not a voice, not exactly, more like the rustle of fabric or the weight of someone shifting on a bed. When neighbors recall the Cartwright home, they remember it as frozen in time. One woman swears she saw the same potted plant in the front window for 10 years, the leaves never growing or wilting. Another claims that when she babysat here once in 1987, there was laughter upstairs and a girl running down the hallway. But when she brought it up years later, Elaine's smile tightened, and she said, "You must be remembering another house." The camera of the mind rises now slowly up the staircase. We see every detail, the way the girl from the night before must have seen them, the carved notch in the third banister post, the faint scuff marks where shoes once kicked the wall, the thin line of dust along the edge of the carpet. The hallway stretches ahead, doors on either side, and at the very end, the one door that matters, the one the girl walked through last night, without hesitation, as if she had been doing it every day of her life. And behind that door somewhere, between the smell of lavender and the clock stuck at 11:37, waits a truth the house has worked very hard to forget. This section leaves the viewer with a different kind of unease than section 1, where the first section hit like a sudden intrusion of the impossible. This one feels embedded, as if the house itself is complicit in keeping the girl's existence uncertain, holding onto her in whispers and shadows while erasing her from plain sight. The girl's return was not the kind of thing you could contain inside one house. By morning, word had already drifted down the street. A neighbor saw her walking past the kitchen window. Another swore she heard the creak of the Cartwright gate, the soft thud of shoes on the front porch. These were the same neighbors who for years had told each other quietly, cautiously, that the Cartwrights had no children, but that wasn't what they'd always said. You have to go back to the summer of 1993. The air that year was different in this town, thicker with heat, lazier with the rhythm of long afternoons, the kind of summer when kids stayed out past dark and parents didn't worry until the streetlights came on. In those days, some people remember the Cartwrights having a daughter. They remember her by name, Hannah. She was a slight, bright-eyed girl, always carrying something, a book, a skipping rope, a notebook. She seemed to guard with her life. She rode a blue bicycle with a white basket. Its plastic flowers faded from the sun. But hey, race where the trouble begins. Not everyone remembers her. Mrs. Donovan, who lived 2 houses down, is certain Hannah existed. She says she saw her nearly every day, waving from the porch or racing her bike toward the park. She remembers hearing her laughter carry across the street during summer barbecues. But when you ask Mr. Patel, the owner of the corner store, he frowns and shakes his head. Cartwrights, no kids, just the 2 of them. Bought milk every Friday, never candy, never toys. You're thinking of the McAllisters lived 3 streets over and never had children at the local school. The records are odd. In the 199-21993 class list, there's a line where a name should be. It's blank. The students are numbered 23 in total, but the numbering skips from 12 to 14. No explanation. A retired teacher, Mrs. Foster, insists there was a girl in that gap. Quiet one, she says, good at art, sat near the window. When asked her name, Mrs. Foster hesitates. She rubs her temple like she's trying to pull something from a locked room in her mind. I can't remember. Isn't that strange? Others have more detailed memories. A man who worked at the video rental store recalls a teenage girl coming in on rainy afternoons to browse the foreign films section. He remembers because she once rented the Red Balloon 3 times in 1 month. But when he tried to find her in the rental records, nothing, no name, no account, no overdue fees, just a blank line where her information should have been. And then there's the opposite, the people who never saw her. These are not casual denials, they're confident, absolute. The mailman for the route swears he never delivered anything for a child at that address. The local dentist has no record of a teenage patient named Hannah Cartwright. One woman who lived across the street for 15 years says she's as sure as the moon there was never a girl in that house. ID have noticed. She insists kids leave traces, bikes on the lawn, shoes by the door, backpacks dropped in the driveway. That place was always empty. Upstairs, what's unsettling isn't just the disagreement, it's the way the memories shift depending on who you talk to. Some people begin by denying she existed, only to pause mid-sentence and say, well, maybe there was someone, just for a little, while others swear they remember her vividly, but on a second telling the details blur. Her hair changes color, her age seems wrong, her clothes from another era entirely. It's as if the memory of her is a photograph left too long in the sun, fading until you're not sure what you're looking at anymore. The narrator pauses here to let the weight settle. Memories are fragile. We like to believe they are fixed snapshots in a mental album, but they are more like glass in water. Shift the light, and they distort too much time, and they dissolve. A local librarian offers another piece of the puzzle. In the town newspaper archive, there's a photograph from a summer festival in 1993. It's a crowd shot, families, food stalls, children running through the grass. And there at the edge of the frame is a girl with wheat-colored hair wearing a dress patterned with tiny flowers. Her face is turned just enough to see her eyes. The print is grainy, but if you stare long enough you might think she's looking straight at the camera, yet the caption lists only the people in the foreground. She is not named. When the librarian checked the negatives for a clearer image, the corner where she stood was empty. These contradictions begin to feel less like bad memory and more like something else, something deliberate. How can so many people remember her vividly, yet produce no record of her? How can official documents skip her name entirely? And why do those who deny her existence sometimes glance away mid-sentence, as if afraid of what they might recall if they keep looking? By the time the girl walked into the Cartwright home in 1999, the town's memory of her was already fractured beyond repair. Some saw her and thought she's back, others thought she was never here. In a small, uneasy few wondered if she wasn't here, where has she been? This section closes with the narrator returning to the present. The morning after her return, a neighbor swears she saw Hannah at the upstairs window looking out toward the street. She wasn't waving, wasn't smiling, just watching with an expression caught somewhere between recognition and warning. But when the neighbor passed the house later that afternoon, the window was empty, and for reasons she can't explain, she felt relieved. The door to the upstairs bedroom was always locked, always, and yet the night she came back she walked right through it, as if the lock had never existed. By the second day, curiosity began to outweigh fear. Elaine lingered outside the door more than once, her hand hovering over the brass knob. but never quite touching it. Thomas stayed away, entirely passing the hallway, without so much as a glance. When the narrator's voice takes us inside, it's not through an act of intrusion. It's as if the door opens itself. The first thing you notice is the air. It is still perfectly still, as though the molecules here have been told not to move. It carries no scent of dust or mildew. Instead, there's something faint, almost floral, lavender maybe, but not the kind you'd buy from a store, the kind that lingers on a wool sweater you wore in spring. And tucked away in a cedar chest, the light in the room doesn't feel right. It filters through the curtains like it has weight, landing in soft squares on the carpet. It doesn't shift as clouds pass. It doesn't fade with the hour. It just remains. Everything is untouched. The bed is neatly made in a way no one has slept in for years. The blanket is smooth. The pillows puff. The sheets faintly cool to the touch, as if the bed exists solely for display. On the nightstand, an alarm clock blinks. 11:37. Not ticking, not flashing, just fixed. When you lean close, you realize it's not even plugged in. A stack of books rests beside it, their spines uncreased, their pages smelling faintly of fresh paper. Despite being decades old, one is left open to a page where a pressed flower lies perfectly preserved, its petals unbroken, its colors still vivid. The walls are lined with posters, but the edges aren't curled from age. They cling perfectly, the colors unfaded. The images feel oddly mismatched. Bands, landscapes, and one that's just a picture of a night sky full of unfamiliar constellations. In the corner sits a small wooden desk. The surface is spotless, but the drawers hold notebooks filled in neat handwriting. The entries are dated, though the dates repeat, the same days looping again and again. Each entry is a slight variation of the same text. It's still the same here. Nothing in the room acknowledges the years that have passed. The pens still write, the cassette tapes in the small stereo still play without warping. Even the batteries in the flashlight tucked under the bed work perfectly. The beam steady and white, but there is something wrong in the way the shadows fall. The corners of the room are deeper than they should be, swallowing more light than they're given. Sometimes out of the corner of your eye you think you see a shape there, like the suggestion of someone sitting in the dark, knees drawn up to their chest. When you look directly, it's gone. And then there's the mirror. A small oval mirror hangs above the dresser. The glass is spotless, but it reflects just slightly slower than it should. If you raise your hand, the reflection follows a fraction of a second late. Stand there long enough and you'll see something in the doorway behind you. Not now, but then a version of the hallway from years ago, with wallpaper that no longer exists, and a younger Elaine walking past. On the dresser is a jewelry box. Inside are small, ordinary things: a bracelet made of braided thread, a single earring without its parakeet with no lock, and a photograph. The photograph shows the bedroom, this bedroom, but there's a figure sitting cross-legged on the bed, smiling faintly. The face is blurred, not in motion, but as if the film refused to capture it. The date in the corner reads August 14th, 1993. If the viewer hasn't felt it yet, this is where the narrator delivers the undercurrent. The room is not holding on to the past, it is refusing the present. It's not just that nothing has changed, it's that nothing can change. Time here has been sealed like a jar, and whatever is inside, whether it's a memory, a person, or something else entirely, is waiting for a moment that hasn't arrived yet. The section closes with an image that lodges in the audience's mind. Elaine standing at the threshold, watching the girl sleep in the bed that has been perfectly made for 6 years. The girl breathes evenly, like someone in a deep dream, but her chest rises and falls just a fraction too slowly. Elaine's hand tightens on the doorframe. She whispers her name again, Hannah, but the girl doesn't stir, and when Elaine blinks, the bed is empty. Elaine Cartwright sits at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, gone cold. It is late afternoon, and the sun has begun its slow descent, casting thin amber light through the blinds. The air smells faintly of steeped leaves, but the steam has long vanished. The narrator's voice here is soft, almost coaxing. This is how she sits when she tells the story, not rigid, not weeping, just still, as if movement might wake something she doesn't want to see. When asked about the girl, Elaine shakes her head. No, she says, her voice quiet but certain. We never had children. Her gaze doesn't falter at first. She sips the tea, though it's bitter and cold, as if the act of drinking is a shield, but the cracks appear quickly. She's asked why. Then there's a bedroom upstairs with floral curtains and a desk full of school notebooks. Elaine blinks, as though the words take a moment to reach her. That room was always like that, she says slowly, as if testing the sentence before releasing it. We just kept it neat for Guess the last two words sound forced, like they were chosen from a limited set of safe answers. The narrator lets the silence stretch here just long enough for the viewer to notice Elaine's thumb rubbing the rim of her mug in small nervous circles. Then, almost without realizing she's speaking, Elaine begins to recall details. She liked to sit in the window seat in the mornings. The light would catch her hair. Her voice fades. Her lips press into a thin line. She shakes her head as if physically dismissing the thought. But you're mistaken. We never had a daughter. It's a strange dance. Elaine, circling closer to the truth, then retreating. She talks about the smell of shampoo lingering in the upstairs bathroom, about the way the hallway carpet used to wear thin in a particular spot, about hearing humming soft tuneless from behind the bedroom door on Sunday afternoons. But each time, she catches herself, her mouth tightening, as though she said too much. Her denial is not the denial of someone confronted with a lie, it's the denial of someone clinging to it, because letting go would mean opening a door she's kept shut for years. The narrator leans in here. There is a kind of truth so heavy that speaking it aloud can break you. You learn to build walls against it, to train your mouth to form other words. But walls are not airtight. Sometimes the truth leaks through. When the conversation turns to the girl's return in 1999, Elaine stiffens. She wasn't returning, Elaine says carefully. She was visiting from somewhere else. The phrasing is odd, deliberate. She doesn't say from another town or from another time, just somewhere else. When pressed, Elaine's composure wavers. Her eyes glisten, not with tears exactly, but with something brittle. She sets her mug down. The ceramic clink louder than it should be. If you open a door, you're not meant to, she says slowly. You can't always close it, and sometimes something follows you through. Her hands fold together on the table, fingers twisting. She does not look up. The narrator pauses here to let the audience sit with the implication. Was Hannah the one who opened the door, or was she the thing that came through? Elaine tries to reset herself, to return to safety. She tells a story about their honeymoon in Maine, about the seagulls that woke them every morning, about the bakery on the corner. Her tone is lighter, now almost cheerful, but midway through the story, she falters. Hannah loved the pastries there, she says without thinking. The moment hangs in the air like a dropped glass. Just before it shatters, her eyes close, her lips pressed together. The name, spoken clearly, without hesitation, has escaped her. She does not try to take it back. She only says very quietly, I told myself I wouldn't say it again. For the first time, Elaine's denial feels less like self-protection and more like obedience, some unspoken rule, some pact made long ago. Her breathing quickens slightly. Her gaze flicks almost involuntarily toward the ceiling, toward the bedroom above them. She's not supposed to be here, Elaine murmurs, and neither are you. The words are not unkind. They sound like a warning. The section closes with the camera of the mind pulling back, framing Elaine in that kitchen light. Her silhouette softened, her hands still trembling around the empty mug. Outside, the wind rattles the blinds just enough to cast shifting shadows on the table, like bars. The narrator's voice is quiet but steady. She says she was never a mother, but every movement, every pause, every unguarded glance says otherwise. Denial can hide the truth from strangers, but it cannot hide the truth from the one who lived it. The trail grows colder here, not in the way a trail fades into the woods, but in the way a story erases itself page by page, frame by frame, until only a blank space remains. The year 1993, the year when the girl known as Hannah should have been everywhere, has vanished. Archivists and researchers combed through local newspapers, school records, and public documents looking for any trace. At first, they found small inconsistencies: a school yearbook photo where the slot for one student is blank, a list of registrations missing, an entire row of names, public library borrowing records where one cardholder's file had been shredded. But the more they looked, the stranger it became. In the town's archives, there is a box of photographic negatives from that summer's festival, the same one with the grainy image of a girl at the edge of the crowd. When technicians developed the negatives, the section containing her was mysteriously obscured, smudged, and scratched beyond repair. It was as if someone had deliberately erased her from the film. In the school's administrative office, a dusty filing cabinet sits locked. Inside are student records from decades ago, grades, attendance, disciplinary notes. But the drawer containing records from 1992 to 1994 is missing entirely. A former administrator, now retired, recalls being told to forget that drawer ever existed. It was like it never happened, she says, like the whole year was erased. Even Christmas photographs from family homes show strange anomalies, a series of prints From 1993 show family groups gathered by the tree, but in the Cartwright home photos, the space where a young girl should stand is always empty. Sometimes a shadow falls where she might have stood, but never a clear image. Old mall security tapes recently recovered during a renovation project were reviewed in hopes of seeing Hannah walking through aisles of late 90s video games or candy stores. Instead, the footage shows empty corridors or blurry figures that disappear the moment the camera zooms in. No child, no teenager, no sign of a girl on a blue bike. Investigators speak in hushed tones about a phenomenon they call the missing year, a stretch of time so thoroughly scrubbed from the records that it feels less like an accident and more like a carefully constructed void. Theories about a clerical error so massive it was never corrected, a deliberate cover-up by unknown parties, something far stranger, a fracture in reality itself where memories and facts split apart. The narrator's voice deepens. If you tried to stitch together the story of Hannah's life from these fragments, the seams never hold. There is a gaping chasm where she should be most alive, most present. The world remembers her only in the spaces between memory and forgetting, and yet the year 1999, the year she reappears, feels impossibly close. Neighbors remember seeing her at the window, the fleeting glimpse of a face that looked too young and too old at once. The parents' voices become the only anchors in a sea of absence. The narrator turns contemplative. What happens when a life is erased from paper and film? Does that life cease to be, or does it linger in the spaces where memory falters? For the Cartwrights, the missing year is not just a blank page, it is a wounded absence that bleeds into every corner of their existence. This section ends with a chilling detail. A local historian who recently discovered a diary buried in an old attic. The diary's pages are filled with accounts of a girl who should not be, a child who appeared and disappeared, who lived in a house that forgot her. The last entry is dated December 31st, 1993. She's fading, the year is closing, but she is still here waiting to be remembered. This moment leaves the audience with the haunting idea that Hannah's story is caught between being and unbeing, a ghost in the records as well as in the house. The house at the end of Maple Street was never quiet, not really, not when the wind was still, not when the stars hid behind a heavy sky, because sometimes in the deep hours after midnight, the bedroom window on the second floor flickered with a pale ghostly light, and if you stood just right on the sidewalk below, you could see a shape. They're always the same, standing silently behind the glass. Neighbors tell stories in whispers. Mrs. Grayson, who lives 3 doors down, recalls those late nights vividly. I saw her once, she says, her voice low, eyes narrowing, as if she's peering through the past, just standing there watching, not moving, like she was waiting for something. A someone. The silhouette was thin and slight, the outline of a teenage girl, hair catching the moonlight like spun gold. It wasn't just Mrs. Grayson. Mr. Harris, who delivers newspapers before dawn, claims he often sees the same figure at the window, her face turned toward the street, as if searching for a familiar face among the shadows. It's like she's trapped, he says, not just in that room, but in time itself. One summer evening, a group of teenagers dared each other to ring the Cartwrights' doorbell. They said that when the door didn't open, they crept to the sidewalk and looked up. They swear they caught a glimpse of the girl's eyes staring back wide, searching, haunted. But when they called out to her, the window went dark. The narrator's voice drifts into a quiet reflection. To watch without being seen is a curse. To linger between presence and absence is a lonely place. This girl, the one who walked through that locked door, seems caught on the edge of 2 worlds, an invisible witness to a life she cannot live. Neighbors have different interpretations. Some believe she is a ghost tethered by sorrow or unfinished business. Others whisper darker ideas, that she's a memory come to life, a shadow pulled from the past by the heavy weight of denial and forgetting. A local artist who once painted the house at dusk recalls spending hours on the porch. I'd look up at the window every now and then, she says, and sometimes I thought she was looking back. It felt like the house held its breath whenever she was there. Her paintings capture the house, glowing faintly in twilight. The bedroom window, a small bright rectangle against the dark. Sometimes the girl's presence is marked by small signs. A neighbor found a single flower petal pressed between the slats of the porch swing, fresh and unblemished, though no flowers bloom nearby. In winter, a dog across the street would howl softly whenever the light flickered in that window, a low, mournful sound that stopped as suddenly as it began. The narrator pulls the listener closer. She watches, she waits, she listens to a world that is both hers and not hers. What does she see from that window? What secrets does the house hold that the rest of the world cannot hear? One evening, the local pastor stopped by to talk with the Cartwrights. He told a quiet story about a girl he once saw standing in a window late at night, her eyes reflecting a sorrow deeper than words. Sometimes, he said, the walls hold more than memories, they hold souls. The section closes with the narrator's voice softening, almost reverent. In that bedroom window between shadow and light, a girl waits, her story unfinished, her presence a whisper on the wind. She is both there and not there, a living question in a house that remembers and forgets all at once. The first time she speaks, it is not with words, it is a breath soft as wind through dry leaves, barely there. Her voice, when it comes, is like a ripple on still water, fragile, trembling, hesitant. "I'm here," she says, not looking directly, but as if speaking to someone far away. She does not say her name, not at first. Instead, she describes a place, one that feels more like a dream than a memory. It's a place where the sky never darkens, but the stars do not shine, where the days fold into one another like pages stuck together, where the streets loop back, always ending where they began. Her words are slow, measured, like she is choosing them from a language she is still learning. She speaks of time as if it is a living thing, something that breathes and shifts and sometimes forgets to move. "I lost the count of how many mornings I've seen," she says, "but it is always the same morning." The narrator's voice softens, pulling the listener closer. She lives in a place where time is trapped, where every moment repeats itself, endless and unchanging. When asked where she has been all these years, her eyes cloud for a moment. "I was waiting," she says simply. She does not say what, for the silence stretches, filled only by the faint rustle of the curtains. She talks about being caught between two worlds, like a shadow stretched thin across a wall. "I am not fully here," she says, voice barely above a whisper. "Not fully there." She pauses, as if searching for the right words. It's like standing in a doorway, feeling both sides but belonging to neither. The girl's story is fragmented, pieces slipping through her fingers like sand. She recalls moments of warmth, the mother's touch, the softness of a blanket, the scent of wildflowers in a meadow that may or may not exist. But those memories come wrapped in confusion, as if they belong to someone else. "Sometimes I remember laughter," she says, "other times just silence." Her voice holds an undercurrent of longing, a yearning for something lost or never fully grasped. "I want to stay," she whispers, "but the place I left it pulls." She does not explain what that place is. She describes the house, the one on Maple Street, as both sanctuary and prison. "The walls remember me," she says, "but they also keep me." Her eyes flicker to the window behind her, the same one neighbors have watched for years. "I watch from here, but I cannot reach out." The narrator invites the audience to imagine what it means to be so close and yet so far, trapped between the echo of a life and the silence of absence. Imagine standing on the edge of your own story, watching a version of yourself move just beyond your grasp, the pain of being forgotten and the pain of being remembered wrong. When asked if she wants to go home, the girl's smile is faint, bittersweet. "I don't know where home is," she says, "but I know it's not here." There is a tremor in her voice now, a flicker of fear beneath the calm. "I'm afraid if I stay, I will disappear again." Her story ends not with answers, but with questions that linger in the silence. "If I vanish once more," she says, "will anyone remember I was here at all?" The room seems to hold its breath, waiting for a reply that never comes. This section closes on an intimate note, a whispered promise, or perhaps a plea. "Remember me," she says, "even if I am gone." In a wooden box beneath the parents' bed, old photographs lie stacked like whispered secrets. They are yellowed at the edges, some curling, others cracked, where they've been handled too many times. But no matter their age, each one carries a weight and imprint of a life that refuses to fully fade. The photos are carefully arranged by Elaine. She touches each one with reverence, her fingers lingering over faces and places frozen in time. There are images of the house, framed in sunlight, warm and familiar, and then there are the family portraits. In these portraits, the girl is there, sometimes clearly, sometimes blurred, as if caught between two worlds. One photograph shows the family gathered in the living room for a holiday. Hannah sits between Thomas and Elaine, smiling gently, but look closely, her face is soft and smudged, as if the film itself refused to hold her presence. Another photo captures a summer picnic in the park. There the girl's shadow stretches longer than the others, but her form is faint, like a fading echo cast on the grass. The edges of her figure bleed into the background, leaving a ghostly outline. Elaine confesses she once tried to burn the photographs. She remembers a night when grief overwhelmed her, a fierce burning need to erase the pain by destroying its proof. But as the flames licked the edges, the photos resisted, refusing to curl, to blacken, to disappear. The fire went out before the images were consumed. One photo in particular haunts her. It is a candid shot taken in the bedroom. The girl sits cross-legged on the bed, looking directly at the camera with eyes that seem to hold 1,000 unspoken stories, but the face is blurred not by motion, but as if deliberately obscured, an attempt to erase her from the moment. When the family developed new photos in the years following this, one always reappeared in the envelopes, unchanged, a silent testament to a presence that could neither be destroyed nor fully remembered. The narrator reflects on the paradox of photographs. They capture moments yet can never hold the whole truth. They are both proof and illusion, evidence and enigma. In the fading light of these images, Hannah exists. And does not the photographs also show something else? Small details that no one noticed at first. A bracelet worn on the girl's wrist, a book clutched in her hand, a small carved figure resting on a windowsill. Behind her, these artifacts whisper stories, echoing lives lived in the spaces between presence and absence. The family albums are punctuated by absences as well, empty spaces where a photo should be, pages skipped, dates left blank. It's as if someone somewhere tried to remove her from the story, but never quite succeeded. The narrator's voice softens, full of melancholy. To hold a photograph is to hold a moment, suspended, fragile, and fleeting. And yet for the Cartwrights, these images are the last thread connecting them to a daughter who might have never been. The section closes on the image of Elaine holding the blurred photo close to her chest, tears silently tracing the lines of a grief both buried and exposed. The photographs they forgot to burn carry the weight of what was, what might have been, and what will never be forgotten. The truth the Cartwrights carry is not a story easily told. It is a secret folded into the creases of their lives, buried beneath years of silence and careful forgetting. When they finally speak, their voices tremble with the weight of what they have long refused to name. Thomas sits opposite Elaine in the dim living room, the soft glow of a single lamp casting long shadows. His hands rest on his knees, fingers intertwined as if holding onto something just out of reach. Elaine's eyes are distant, clouded with memories too painful to speak aloud. Together, they begin to unravel a story that feels less like reality and more like a parable, an ancient warning dressed in modern grief. We never wanted her to be born, Thomas says, his voice low, almost a whisper. Elaine nods slowly, her lips pressed together in a line of quiet resignation. They tell of a promise made long before Hannah's Aravala pact, born from fear and hope. They speak of a night heavy with stars when fate seemed fragile and the future uncertain. We were told she could not stay. Elaine murmurs that she was not meant for this world. The narrator's voice deepens, drawing the listener into this moment of confession. Sometimes love is a chain as much as it is a bond. Sometimes the fiercest protection is also the deepest imprisonment. Thomas explains that from the beginning they lived with a shadow hanging over them. The doctors warned of complications, of a child born under strange circumstances, whose presence seemed to bend the fabric of their reality. She came from somewhere we didn't understand, Thomas says, and we were told she could not live in the light of this world. Elaine's hands tremble as she recounts the days when hope and despair intertwined. We tried to hold her close, to love her, but every time we looked at her it felt like we were watching a ghost, something too fragile to last. Her voice breaks, but she presses on. They speak of nights filled with whispers and warnings, of dreams that bled into waking hours. There was a door, Thomas says, a door we should never have opened, but once it was open, there was no closing it again. The parents reveal that Hannah's return in 1999 was not a miracle, but a reckoning. She came back not as the daughter we lost, but as the consequence of a promise broken. Elaine's eyes glisten with unshed tears. We buried her truth so deeply because the alternative was unbearable. The narrator offers a moment of stillness. To bury a truth is to live in a grave of your own making, and sometimes the weight of that grave can break even the strongest souls. Thomas looks away, voice heavy with regret. We dreamed of erasing her, forgetting her, pretending she never existed. But memories don't disappear, they fester. Elaine nods, her gaze distant. She is here in the silence and the shadows and the spaces between what is said and what is left unsaid. They confess that the locked bedroom was not just a room, it was a sanctuary and a prison, a place to keep the impossible contained, to protect the world from her and perhaps themselves. We are haunted, Elaine says, simply not by ghosts, but by what we refuse to face. The story closes with the parents' final plea, an acknowledgement of love wrapped in sorrow and fear. We loved her enough to let her go, Thomas says, voice breaking. but never enough to forget. Elaine reaches out, taking his hand, holding it tightly. We carry her with us, even if the world cannot. The narrator ends this section with a quiet, resonant reflection. The Cartwright's truth is not one of simple loss, but of a love complicated by the impossibly, a love that tried to hold a life too fragile for this world, and the pain of a promise that could never be kept. The morning after the girl's quiet return, the house felt impossibly still, too still, as if time itself had hesitated and then drawn back its breath. Elaine woke early, the sunlight pale and fragile through the curtains. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, herself searching for something she could no longer name. Upstairs, the bedroom door stood closed, its brass knob cool beneath her trembling fingers. She paused, heart hammering, and then gently pushed it open. The room was empty. The bed lay neatly made, untouched since the night before. The clock on the nightstand blinked the same frozen time, 11:37, but there was no sign of the girl who had returned. No shadow, no whisper, no breath. Thomas found Elaine there, standing silent in the doorway, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and heartbreak. "She's gone," Elaine whispered, voice cracking. Thomas nodded slowly, the weight of grief settling between them. Like a second skin vanished, he said, his words barely audible. The house seemed to exhale, the heavy silence lifting just enough to carry a faint lingering scent, the same floral note that haunted the staircase. It was a ghost of presence, a trace of something just slipped beyond reach. Neighbors noticed the change too. The window where the girl had stood watching for so many nights was dark and empty once again. The porch swing creaked softly in the wind, unaccompanied by the usual flower petals or whispered shadows. The narrator's voice softened. "She vanished. Once, when the world forgot her, she vanished." Again, slipping quietly back into the spaces between memory and forgetting. In the days that followed, the Cartwright house became a place of absence. The locked bedroom was no longer a sanctuary, but a hollow reminder, a room that held nothing and everything all at once. Elaine moved through the house with slow, deliberate steps, touching surfaces as if trying to hold on to something slipping through her fingers. Thomas spoke, less now, retreating into the silence of his own mind. His gaze often drifted toward the staircase, toward the door that held so many secrets, but he never crossed the threshold. The neighbors spoke in hushed tones of the girl who had come and gone like a whisper. Some claimed to see her silhouette in the corner of their eye, just beyond the reach of clear sight. Others said the house felt colder, emptier without her quiet presence. The narrator invites the audience to imagine the weight of vanishing twice, not once, but again and again, slow fading until only a trace remains. To disappear is to be forgotten. To vanish twice is to become a question that no one can answer. The section closes on Elaine standing once more by the bedroom window, staring out into the night. The street is quiet, the stars distant and cold. She whispers a name into the darkness, Hannah, and though no one answers, the night seems to hold the word gently, like a promise not yet broken. Maple Street wakes slowly to a new day, untouched by time, yet irrevocably changed. The sun rises soft and pale over the rooftops, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement where children once played. The house at the end stands silent, its windows empty, mirrors reflecting a world that has moved on without her. Neighbors pass by with quiet steps, their glances flickering toward the porch swing that no longer creaks, the garden that no longer blooms. It is a street that remembers and yet forgets. Elaine walks down the sidewalk, her footsteps steady, but her heart heavy. She pauses beneath the bedroom window, now bare of any flicker or shape. She reaches up, fingers tracing the glass, as if to touch a memory. "She was here," Elaine whispers, the words hang in the morning air, fragile, unclaimed. The narrator invites the listener to feel the stillness, the weight of absence that drapes over the street like a shroud. This street holds its breath for a girl who walked in and out of its life, once in flesh, once in shadow, and now only in the silence left behind. A breeze stirs the leaves, scattering petals along the cracked curb, petals with no flower to call home. The birds sing softly, their songs carrying notes of longing and lost. Neighbors speak in quiet tones of a presence they almost believe in, a fleeting glimpse at twilight, a shadow caught just beyond the corner of an eye. Some say the house feels empty, too empty, like a page torn from a book that can never be rewritten. The narrator reflects, sometimes a life leaves a mark not in moments lived, but in moments lost, ghosts of what might have been etched into the fabric of place and memory. The street stretches on, unchanging, yet transformed, a place where time folds back on itself, and stories are half spoken, half forgotten. Elaine turns away from the window, her breath slow and steady, She carries the weight of a daughter who was and was not both gone and never gone. The final words linger soft as a sigh in the street. Without her, the silence remembers the screen, fades gently into darkness, leaving the audience with a quiet question that settles deep. What does it mean to be truly remembered?